We have Keith Fix here from Retail Aware. Welcome, Keith. Let's everyone give Keith a round of applause. Thank you. So I'm not going to read your bio. We're just going to talk.
Please don't.
Yeah.
That's awkward. I made the mistake of like pounding an energy drink before this because I was going to fall asleep. So like if I am shaky, it is because I haven't had an energy drink in months. So
it's just
let's see how this goes.
Way too much caffeine. I need to turn down the mic real quick because we're like way too loud. We had
that's the usual for me.
That's me. I'm pretty loud too. And then we had Brian Kaiser from Huddle, and he's very quiet, so I had it like jacked up to pick him up. All right, now we're a lot better. So welcome, Keith. Thank you for coming. Thanks for sitting down with us and having this fireside chat. It's a relatively informal kind of format, so that you don't have to have a presentation ready or whatever. And did you bring your PowerPoint?
Yeah, no. I don't have
we forgot the projector, so it's kind of useless. We'll just wing it. All right. So let's start with where you're at now. Just give us an overview of what Retail Aware is, your role in that, and where you're at, and then we'll work backwards from there.
Yeah, for sure. So highest level, Retail Aware, we work with some of the world's most recognized brands. We help them measure their product displays in stores. So functionally, that's quite literally what we do. And on the back end, what we're actually doing is kind of ushering in the new wave of in-store media. So if you think about this, brands today are becoming media companies. So, and as such, the way that they measure their channels of distribution and reach has to be done in a media format. Historically, what a lot of people don't realize is that shelves are media. So when you walk into a store, that Coke that's sitting on the shelf, that is essentially, that shelf is paid for by the brand. That placement is decided by the brand, and whatever specials and promotions and things go on, the brand is paying for. And so we created a way for brands to measure their shelves. That's a pun somewhere in there. Every time I say that, I catch it myself. To actually measure themselves and provide, so essentially functionally like a CPM rate, so they can see how many impressions that Coke can is getting, how many times people are picking it up, so product engagement, and eventually we'll be releasing like dwell time and those types of things. So functionally, they can now measure their in-store channel just like they do digitally. And some really fun like background stuff, because I think it might be of interest to the group here. What's unique to how we've done this is that we developed this technology that allows us to do it without cameras. And so a lot of our IP and our patents and whatnot are focused on the ability, like we can do this with motion, light, contact, and so we can do this really, really inexpensively. So we have little battery-powered sense devices that get placed in the fridges or on end caps or built into product displays that can measure this stuff and provide this data back to our brand partners. And so that's kind of been the big innovation and of where we are, and, of where we started. And it's crazy because we started with one brand here in Omaha. Actually, was one of our one of our early adopters and early customers. And since then, we've just continued to expand, and it's crazy. I think we were looking at our customer our customer role, and most of our customers are like Fortune 500. They're the companies that you guys all know and we all use, and so it's been incredible to kind of see that materialize.
Well, I think an interesting question to follow on that is how did that happen? Is that purposeful, or did it just kind of you created a product that was so good?
Sheer will. No, honestly, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of miles. So there certainly was a path, right? It wasn't just like we woke up and
When did you start Retail Aware?
So officially, we started Moonlighting, and here's the other thing too: is like there's the stories that you don't hear about, right, and the stuff that you don't read about. So like we started working on it, 2016, 17-ish, 2017 underground. I didn't go full time into Retail Aware until 2018, and we had a couple false starts, and it was just a Moonlight type project. But I had been doing retail technology integration. Out of high school, I managed a CRM for a global apparel company. And so like there was this thing, like I had this path of like from the apparel company to doing retail integration to actually like jumping in and saying, oh, we're having our, we're selling this. We identified a problem. Let's go solve it. There certainly was a path, and it wasn't linear. So by any means, but looking back, I can go back and say, oh, that experience led to this, led to this, led to this. And I think that made us a much better company, just being able to have that experience in the space going into it.
Right. So, I think something that people that are ideas people, right? People that come up with ideas or are kind of hustlers, right? That, which I've heard you describe yourself that way, or at least you were when you were younger. You've come up with a lot of different ideas that you've worked on. How do you decide which of those ideas are worth really throwing yourself into? And like you said, you worked on retail wear for a while before going full time on it. Yeah. Did you know while you were moonlighting it that this was going to be, or were you just kind of experimenting with it until you found out whether it's going to be something to do full time?
Yeah, that moment of truth is when you can convince someone to part with their hard-earned cash for you. Like we pre-sold, a customer, and I had something happen. I've been doing sales at that point for almost a decade, and I had never had a moment where a customer wrote a check right there, because they said, this is such a big problem. Here's a 5-figure check, go solve it. And we didn't have product at that point. And we were totally transparent and honest with the client, said, hey, we're building this solution. We're going to develop this, alongside with you, but you're going to have data and you're going to have insights that no one else has. And that's, and that ultimately led to their success. And, we got to ride along with it. But it really, really comes down to getting that first customer, learning, getting people to actually pay, for whatever you're building, and you don't even have to have it built. Right. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it right now.
Yeah, I hear that a lot when we're talking to founders, that almost everybody that we've talked to actually had built, got a customer before they built their first product, which almost is like part of the secret sauce, right? Is making sure that someone actually wants to pay for it before you go build the thing. How did you, I kind of want to get a little granular there. Was that someone that you had a relationship with, or how did you make that conversation start in the first place?
Yeah, so, and my experience might be a little bit different than consumer-based folks, because I'm enterprise, we're kind of an enterprise sales, B2B, SaaS-ish offering. And so, I leaned into kind of my experience over the years and my network and connection. I think that's the best way where you can really learn. I not to put down a lot of the groups that drop out of college and start your startup. I think you have technologists that are really, really good at building things. And then you have business people that are really good at identifying ideas and putting things into operations and having a vision and those types of things. And so what's great about it is when you marry those two things together, that's when the magic happens. And so you need the discipline to go out and say, I should build this. And you find someone to pay you money. And then you build, and you continue building and you grow from there. And I think that's one of the things that we often miss, is that experience and that personal experience that you have. Everyone has job experience. Everyone has something that's like a personal pain. I think, I hear it quite often, that personal pain is what leads to some of the best ideas. For me, it was in my previous lifetime when I realized that my clients, that I was working with brands, and they didn't have the data they needed to make decisions around what was happening in stores. Stores were a black box. And this was, it still is for a lot of our folks. A lot of our clients have no idea what happens in the, millions of establishments that they distribute to. And so that was something that I felt as a personal pain point in my previous role. And so that's ultimately what kind of led me down the path of oh, I need to do this. So it's that itch, you get that itch that you can't get rid of.
How long was that before you, like, when in your process, like, you kind of gave us a glimpse into like how long you were kind of working on it. Was that really early on, or were you kind of toiling with what this would look like before you got that first pre-sale?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are two things. The idea you start with and where you end up are going to be totally different things most of the time. And that's okay. Because it's about a process, and you have an idea of what you think it needs to be, and then you put it in front of customers and you build it. And that was one of the things that made our solution so compelling, is because like it was built alongside actual customers. And sometimes you'll see really like crazy tools and stuff, and as technologists you sometimes want to build for the sake of building, and but that doesn't lead to great businesses, right? Like you constantly have to be like checking and solving the problem. And so from our perspective, like we took that early feedback, and at every moment I was constantly saying, okay, do we keep going or do we kill this? Or do we pivot to something, do we make this change and make it more valuable? When we started, we had a totally different, it started as like Wi-Fi tracking, like mobile phone tracking, and now we couldn't be further away from that.
Yeah.
As a whole. So again, it's okay to go through the process, and it's okay to have iterations, but it's so important to listen to customers, and the best feedback is those dollars. Like I look at the Stripe accounts and I see like the dollars going in, you start to see like that's your ultimate feedback right there.
Yeah. Well, I hear that also from a lot of CEOs especially, is that kind of picking out what that key metric is, which often is revenue, right? Recurring revenue or something, and kind of evangelizing that among the company so that people know on your team, as you grow, especially like where you're at and what you're even all doing, right?
Yeah. And it's talking about like key insights, that's also been a learning process. And revenue, especially in early stage, it certainly is a focus, but especially when you're in a high growth, tech startup, especially if you're venture backed, you're looking at other indicators, other things that are giving you the idea that, this is going to be big. So one of the key ones a lot of, venture folks look at is month over month growth. So you could have maybe only $1,000 a month in revenue, but if you are growing 100% month over month, 200%, you're averaging 30, I think fantastic. We've been averaging about 30% ourselves. And like, that's a number that you can model out, and it compounds very rapidly to a very big opportunity. And so that's something also, and we switched one of our more important insights we realized was something we call time to insight. So as a data company, constantly what we're selling to clients are these aha moments, like these aha insights. So that moment that a client can look at our data and make an actionable change to their business. And so that's something that we started measuring, and it's really, really brought a lot of clarity and focus onto what we're working on next. Because if clients aren't having those aha moments, they're not going to continue to use the tool, and they're not going to continue their subscription, those types of things.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, that's the aha moment thing is something I've heard many successful founders say is like, can you create that for your customers? Because that's a differentiator, right? That makes people want to stay. And that also is a way that you can pull in other customers and say like, look at this aha moment that this other person.
Yeah, you want to make your, especially in B2B, and I think, so I'm definitely more sales on the sales side of the house when it comes to this kind of stuff. But like, one of the best things I ever heard is, especially when you're selling to companies, is like companies are people, and people buy from people. And so it's really about relationships and the things that like make you want to drink a Coke. Sorry, I'm like all about I'm all about Coke right now. And the things that like make you want to drink a Coke, that relationship you have, believe it or not, like that's the kind of relationship that you strive with a B2B company. Think of I'm not going to call out anyone's, but there's a lot of tools that people use in their daily work routine that they hate, right? And you can think of like, I think we all know, we know those tools, and then there's the tools that you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't live without this. Like I couldn't do my work without this. And so it's like trying to build around that camp of like helping people not only do their job and do their work better, but like helping them be a champion and a winner in their role, because that's really what we're here for.
Right. Yeah. Especially when you're selling software or hardware to a company. Obviously, there is an actual person, and you make them look good because they were the ones that chose to work with you.
Yeah. One of our biggest problems is our clients keep getting promoted. That's actually a problem for us, which is great, but
I feel like that should be a blog post or something.
We'll have a very long expose about that.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there about being venture backed, and that one of the key pieces there is growth, not necessarily exactly what the revenue numbers are. What are some of the other things that when founders are either about to or trying to be on the trajectory of raising capital and fitting into that venture scalable model that they should be considering?
So
from your perspective,
obviously. No, 100%. I think at the beginning, like, you got to prove it to yourself, right? And that comes from, getting an MVP as fast as possible, minimum viable product put together. There's no code solution, so you don't even need to be an engineer to throw a launch page and start collecting credit cards. You can do that tomorrow. I 100% advocate for that. And then, like, you prove it to yourself, and then you start looking at what are the avenues that I can to start raising. It has never been simultaneously easier and also harder to raise capital, especially at the earlier stage. There's a ton of great capital, but it's tied to validation and proof points, right? And so, it's one of those things that, especially in the Midwest, we look for. We're a little bit more conservative, right? We don't. We're not moonshot deals, like things that sound totally crazy, like an audio platform that people have to log into live, and you know what I mean, like that, like, and with no users or whatever the case may be. But I think the single best thing that you can do is prove it to yourself. And then this is going to be a big ad for InMotion and all the other accelerator programs. We went through an accelerator program, and look, I've done this business thing. This is like my third, fourth company, and and I had a previous exit, and I think going through an accelerator, it was more about like not only the putting you on a schedule, because you've got a very defined period of time to hit specific milestones, but it was the network. So tapping into that network, it was the peer camaraderie, and I 100% think, especially if you don't have a track record, an accelerator program is one of the perfect ways to like fast track, hit the gas pedal, and get something launched. And there's so many great programs out there right now. I think there's more than ever, and it makes it easier to raise because it inherently comes with a network. Like, there's a network of investors and mentors and supporters that are built into that. So those things, I used to be kind of on accelerators, but I really do think that, especially now with how competitive and how many different things there are out there, that those really provide a great framework, especially for folks here in the Midwest that are, you're not in the Bay Area, you're not in New York, it's a great way to kind of raise your profile and tap into that.
Yeah, I mean, and like you touched on it there a little bit. It also teaches you to set a milestone and like hit it in a specific amount of time. Because once you're funded, I mean, really those investors are looking at their annualized rate of return. So it's like, if you're not growing fast enough, even if someday you exit for $1 billion or something, if you don't get there fast enough, then they could have just put their money in the stock market.
Well, okay, and that's and I'm pretty contrarian view on this. So you have to be like honest with yourself what outcome you want, right? And now I can be a little bit more picky, but in the past it's like, give me money. You're like begging on the corner, like saying, hey, give me cash. But you want to make sure that, there is something like a lifestyle business, which there's a place for that. And you can actually build a sustainable, couple $1 million annualized SaaS business. And that's a great business, especially if you own it all or own a majority of it. And that's a great lifestyle, right? That's not a venture-backed business, all right? That's not a business that can go out and raise, millions and millions of dollars. But you can create a good lifestyle. You can sell it on
Micro-acquire.
Yeah, Derek's all about that. About that. And and you can, and it's a great business. But you also want to be aligned when you take on investment capital, because angels will have an expectation. Like early stage people that understand the risk, like have to approach it like, I'm never going to see that money. I personally have made investments. I'm like, I'm never going to see that money. and so like you go in with that mentality, but as you go further down the road, you want to make sure, like, that's one of the questions we just, we just went through the whole round process and, fundraising process. And that was one of my first questions. What is a successful outcome for you? Is it a base hit, which I know this is going to sound terrible, but a base hit is like tens of millions of dollars, right? Like, $20, $30 million exit, that might be a base hit or a double for a venture firm. Or do you need a home run in order for this investment to be successful? And so home run is $1 billion unicorn, exit. And that's fundamentally, like, some people don't want a $1 billion company. Some people, lifestyle is fantastic. I can tell you, I look back and I'm like, gosh, life was easier. But I also am like, that was one of the things I'm aligned with all of our stakeholders to say, hey, this is an outcome that's okay for us. If we get bought out at this rate or whatever, this price or whatever, that's good. But it is nice to also know that, hey, you can have the outsized outcome, the $1 billion unicorn exit, or you can have a base hit and it's going to be a fantastic exit. Your investors will be happy, and you go on and you build the next thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think
I know it sounds easy, but
well, no, having that perspective when you're starting, the amount of and I didn't know this when I first got into like the startup space. The amount of founders that I talk to that really just they have a lifestyle business on their hand and they are talking about raising money, and it's like, why? Just build that business, and then plug for micro-acquire. That's like a great thing that exists now.
And the crowdfunding platforms, we did a syndicate. I've participated in syndicates.
There's so many different things.
You can go to AngelList and launch or get someone to sponsor your syndicate. So there's just so many ways to get capital, and that's a great platform for, like, you might not be venture ready or need venture money.
Yeah. So. Yeah. How do you feel like someone knows? Is it just kind of extrapolating that out and seeing what realistically that market value is? Yeah,
I think you start to see your contract sizes. So like for us, it was when I started to see, like, we had, I'm trying to, it's always weird because I'm like, how much can I talk about? But for the benefit of the group, like, our contract sizes, when we had one customer, they started with a handful of stores, and it was like a couple $1,000, couple grand account. Their first full year with us, it became, low, mid 5 figures. Like, okay. And then this year, the renewal is 7 figures subscription. That's one customer. And so that's when you start to realize, you say, okay, well, what was the cost to, the customer acquisition cost? What was the growth on that? And you can create a model, and you can create a financial model around that. And when you can build out that financial model that says, this is how much it costs to acquire a customer, here's the channels on how we do it, this is what we need to do it, the resources, the inputs that we need to deliver that, that's when you know that you're venture ready. So if you haven't, Mark Aikler from Math Ventures has a fantastic resource out there for financial model, and definitely look it up. When you can build a financial model around your business, that's when you know that you have a venture thing. Because the other thing you're looking at is just the size of the market. If you don't have $1 billion market, multi-billion dollar market, you're not venturable. And that's okay. Like, I don't know why it's the goal shouldn't be to like raise forever. The goal should be to build enterprise value and have an outsized outcome for yourself that meets your lifestyle needs. Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand what those options are, and investors to understand where they fit in that spot as well, if they're not used to investing in tech companies and stuff. So let's open it up to questions for whoever has questions. Please. Chris, go ahead.
I kind of wanted to just ask the same question Craig asked earlier, but Keith, one of your biggest skills is you are so good at selling to enterprise clients. experience. And I feel like you kind of just like said that like nonchalant. That's like the exact opposite. I think of like every single starter. Like everyone's like, oh, we need to start small and gradually build up. Like you did the exact opposite. Like, oh, I need to start huge. Like that's the whole reason you've been successful. But I guess my question is like, what's the difference between? Because I get scared off personally by selling to big companies because it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So just like what's the difference between selling to like a huge company like that and how do you do that?
Yeah, so there's a process and a playbook, right? And that's the thing. Once you start learning that there's a process for all of this stuff, it becomes easier. So I was fortunate to, I learned Miller-Heiman, which is a sales technique, and you start learning all the key stakeholders because I remember walking into the first course, the first class, and the professor saying, "Who wants to learn how to sell $1 million contract?" right? And I mean, who doesn't? Who wants to learn how to sell $1 million contract? Yeah, me too. So, and again, like you start with this understanding that you have people, right? And you have an end user, a decision maker, purse strings, so the person that controls the money. And so you have like multiple stakeholders that are part of the decision-making process. And so it's a process of like understanding who those stakeholders are, what makes them pick up that can and be like, I want that, right? And so like it's a little bit of a process. And then the other thing too is that I put ourselves where they go. Like you go where your customers are. We spent very heavily on trade shows and industry events because that's where our customers went. We're in retail. It's a very old school relationship-based industry. And so you have to build those connections. And so trade shows were a great way for us to like kick off because we would have our booth, like we were down at South by Southwest and like, little did we know, which is, no one, they know that you're a startup, but they don't know how startup you are. And so you kind of have to like save face. And then the other flip side of it is that there also every company is really looking for disruptive, innovative, new technologies and new ways to do their business. So a lot of companies have innovation directors and they have innovation license and people whose job is to discover new technologies to bring to the organization. And those are great conduits into, selling into those companies. It's my best startup hack, when it comes to selling into those. And guess what they're all plugged into? Accelerators. So we all, it comes all full circle. But yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your development of culture from 1 to 3 to 5 to 15, and how important is that for retail?
Development of culture, people.
Yeah.
I'll be kind of fully transparent. I think we have a lot. We have a ways to go, and I think we can do we could do a lot better when it comes to that. And I think that the biggest challenge that you have is when you start with it's just you, right? And then you add in your second person. Okay, now you've got a business partner, and you guys are you start compromising. Then you add in a third person, and then now you're compromising between 3 people, and it's a little bit tough because then as you start adding more people, you lose control and you lose autonomy. And things get missed, and it can be tough. It's a tough position. And then we kind of got thrown in this last year when everything changed. We were like all going in the office and like wearing our little battle gear and getting in the trenches together. To oh my gosh, we can't see each other, kind of thing. And so that was a shock for us this last year. But I think in a good way because we've learned to navigate that. And then. Something that we just hired. So we just brought on a VP of Ops, functionally like a COO. We should have had that. We should have had that person a year ago, or 2 years ago, because there is something about there's three functioning pieces to any business: people, process, and product. Right? You start with fantastic people, and and oftentimes there's people that might not be a fit for startups. So you have. And that's its own that's its own conversation. But then you have like the process and you have the product. As long as you have two of those things going, you'll be. But the thing you can't compromise is on the people. And for us, like it so comes down to wrapping processes and making sure like the details aren't missed and like little things for like making sure that like we have resources like monitors and making sure our benefits are great. Those types of things, like that's process stuff that you have to be so fine, tuned into, especially as you start to see, you go past 10, 10 folks, because you aren't seeing everyone face to face. And especially now you aren't seeing them day to day, being mostly remote, So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah, it works.
Hi, you talked about the aha moment for business.
Yeah.
Do you have an aha moment that you look for when you're hiring somebody for the company? Did you have to see, or you have to have that quality that you kind of have to see?
Yeah, one of our core values is run fast, and one of the byproducts of that sometimes you trip. But I think there's kind of this thing that happens. The things that have worked out the best, in our case, are folks that get plugged in, and folks that we meet through the community and get referred through through current employees, those types of things. And I think having a full understanding of what you're getting into, right? Like startup it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for anyone that wants consistency. You never know what, it's kind of like you don't know what's going to rain down on you every day. And so I think for us, it's like you kind of get a sense and feel of who that is over time. And the way that hiring's done today is just so broken. Because you're supposed to have a 10-minute conversation, you have a 30-hour conversation for someone that you're supposed to like, essentially you're getting married. Can you imagine like, like having a, 5-minute, whatever, and then being,
Check off these boxes.
I know, check. And so like relationships have been where we've had the most success. And that's something that I've thought, I've thought quite a bit about. And so like our VP of Ops had wanted to work with us for over a year. And, I was joking with him. I was like, oh, you had the longest interview ever. And so, but I think it's important because those relationships you're building them right now, right? By being here, being plugged in the community. I know the people that are the first people to mind that I call up when I have a need or I have something that comes up. So, there's no silver bullet, but I do think that there's going to be a massive shift in how we hire and our relationship with work. And again, that's another conversation, another much larger conversation.
Well, we have time for one more question. Okay, yeah, Justin.
Okay. I had two. The first one's quick.
You can do both, I guess.
I'm long-winded, but
You mentioned, visualizing that next thing, and
yeah.
whether it be that home run or just the basic, which is totally fun. I love that you mentioned that. Knowing your background as a serial entrepreneur, is there something that's rolling around that you've been thinking about as you're obviously still head down in retail wear? Is there something that can be a yes or no?
How do you stay focused?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I don't, and I have to be reined in quite often. Very much. Anyone that's worked with me knows that they have to say no to me a lot. and it's one of those things that you get better at over time. But you constantly have to ask, and it's one of the criteria when we're not just for building, but like when we're saying, should we be working on this? It's like, is this moving us towards our bigger objective, or is this a distraction? And sometimes those distractions they're hidden, they're pretty sly. But it's not until you're full into something that things start happening. And the only other thing I will add to that is like, case in point, it wasn't until I went full time into retail wear that stuff happened like this. So we have been doing it online, but when you're fully committed and like you're not going to pay your mortgage if you don't figure it out, like that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, awesome. My next question was maybe your biggest challenge that you encountered with retail wear. Is there a story that sticks out where you're just like, shoot, I really thought this was going to be it? And then what was the teachable moment that you could share with us all?
Oh gosh. So does anyone remember last year? Okay. There was a point I legitimately thought, like, I was getting on a flight back to Omaha. I'm like, you know, this could be bad. And I did this. We turned around. I had this idea to, you know, we took the data from the stores that we had, and we released this. You know, I sent out this press release for the best times to go grocery shopping. And in the middle, it was like in the beginning of April, end of March. No, it was beginning of April, I think. And lo and behold, I got a call from the editor at Forbes. And they did a whole piece on it. Wall Street Journal followed up. Consumer Reports. We were on the Today Show. It was incredible. So in the middle of what should have been the death of retail aware was our most exposure we had ever got. And it was just incredible. And, now, Consumer Reports still uses our data. Wall Street Journal periodically quotes us. And, it was the catalyst for something bigger. And I think that's one of the things that you look at. And then we went on that June. So that summer, we raised $1 million round in the middle of the pandemic in retail when we couldn't even get into stores. So I think like, what's the right word? A resilience. And it's like when you're back up into the corner, like I think that's one of the skill sets of a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people that are really good at this is like you find a way to turn, I'm trying not to swear. I've gotten so much better at it too.
It's actually okay. You're allowed.
I was trying.
I mean, unless for your brand, you're trying to not.
Say. Man, I used to be so bad, and I look back at old videos. I'm like, this is gonna haunt me at some point. This is gonna come back up. But you just find a way to make it work, and I think that's that's the thing is like somehow we did it, and when things shouldn't work, you make them work and you will them into existence and you do what it takes. And I know that sounds so hokey, but it really, really is a key part of it. So everyone will tell you a story of like when they were near death or when they've had an issue or when things really shouldn't have worked out. But someone asked me if I sleep, if I sleep well at night or whatnot. I should just if I let it consume me, I've had so much crap like happen in my life and so many things go down that I should have had a mental breakdown years ago. I probably did. But you know what, like just being able, I'm fine because I know I've taught myself and I've trained myself that we'll figure it out. Like we'll find a way. And I think that's a mark, and that's something that you just learn to do as you start building and growing your businesses.
Thanks.
Fight or flight instinct is kind of, I think that sums that up really well. Exactly.
Not letting it get to you.
Yeah. Everything's figure-outable. I like that.
Yeah. There is nothing like legitimate. If a global pandemic like can't take you down, like think of how strong the companies that like survived and made it through. Like if you can make it through last year, like oh my gosh, just think about. I'm excited just to see where the future is going to take folks that survived.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people started new companies in the midst of that, so that'll be interesting. One of Startup Grind's key values is that we give first before asking for anything. So is there any way that Startup Grind and the community of Startup Grind can help you or help Retail Aware, as you continue down your journey? Yeah,
of course. We are hiring.
That's usually how it is. Yeah.
I was gonna say, as most folks, as most folks are. So feel free, follow our LinkedIn page, share our updates. We're gonna have a really, really like incredible announcement coming up here in a couple weeks. It's embargoed, otherwise I'd share it with you guys. Yeah, so follow us. We're hiring. Tell everyone about about retail wear, and then if you know anyone that has an interest and love for working with some of the world's most recognized brands, and just creating incredible new data, we'd love to have them join us. So.
All right, thank you. Let's everyone give it a round of applause.